The silence that followed was deafening. My daughter Emma's tears hadn't even dried when Derek's hand connected with her cheek, and suddenly every conversation in our family dining room stopped like someone had pressed pause on Christmas itself. That's when I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my federal credentials, and watched the color drain from his face as I said 5 words that changed everything. FBI, you're under arrest now. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Agent Sarah Mitchell, and what I'm about to share with you isn't just about one terrible moment at a family gathering. It's about the power of quiet strength, the protection we owe the innocent, and how sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who need to learn respect the hardest way possible. The aroma of roasted turkey and cinnamon-spiced sweet potatoes filled my childhood home, but underneath the familiar comfort of Christmas dinner preparations lay an undercurrent of tension that had been building for months. I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching my sister Melissa laugh at something her boyfriend Derek was saying, while my 6-year-old daughter Emma played quietly with her new dollhouse in the living room. Derek Morrison had been part of our family gatherings for 8 months now, ever since Melissa met him at the law firm where she worked as a paralegal. He was a senior associate with an expensive suit, a confident handshake, and the kind of practiced charm that made first impressions memorable. What he didn't know, what none of my family knew, was that I had been conducting a very different kind of background check on him than the casual curiosity most families employ when evaluating new partners. My work with the Federal Bureau of Investigation had taught me to notice details that others missed, to observe behavioral patterns that revealed character beneath surface presentation. Derek's interactions with Emma had been setting off quiet alarms in my trained instincts for weeks, though I had hoped my professional paranoia was creating problems that didn't actually exist. "Sarah, you're being too quiet again," my mother said as she adjusted the dining room table settings with the meticulous attention to detail that had characterized every family gathering since my childhood. "Derek was just telling us about the partnership opportunity at his firm. Isn't that wonderful news?" The comment carried the subtle weight of expectation that had defined my relationship with my family since I had chosen federal law enforcement over more conventional career paths. My mother, Patricia, had never quite understood why I had pursued work that required carrying a weapon and investigating criminals when I could have used my criminal justice degree for safer, more predictable employment. My father, Robert, looked up from carving the turkey with the expression he wore when navigating conversations that might become complicated. "Sarah's work is important too, Patricia. National security matters just as much as legal partnership." The diplomatic response revealed how carefully my family had learned to discuss my career without acknowledging that they had never fully understood what my work actually involved. For 3 years, I had allowed them to believe I worked in some general capacity for federal law enforcement, handling paperwork and administrative duties that kept me safely behind a desk in downtown offices. The truth was significantly more complex and considerably more dangerous than their assumptions suggested. My specialized assignment involved investigating domestic terrorism networks, tracking financial crimes that crossed state lines, and conducting surveillance operations that required extensive undercover work. The skills I had developed through federal training and field experience had created a professional identity that existed entirely separate from the person my family thought they knew. Derek dominated the pre-dinner conversation with stories about courtroom victories and client relationships, displaying the kind of confident self-promotion that impressed people who valued success through traditional metrics. His expensive watch caught the light as he gestured, emphasizing points about billable hours and partnership prospects that positioned him as someone worthy of admiration and respect. Emma, meanwhile, remained focused on her dollhouse, creating elaborate scenarios with tiny furniture and miniature families that reflected the kind of imaginative play that had characterized her personality since toddlerhood. She was a quiet child by nature, preferring books and creative activities to the louder, more demanding forms of attention that many children her age pursue. "Emma seems very focused on her toys," Derek observed, his tone carrying a subtle criticism that made me pause my kitchen preparations to listen more carefully. At 6 years old, shouldn't she be more interested in interacting with adults? The question revealed an understanding of child development that concerned me, suggesting expectations about behavior that weren't appropriate for Emma's age or personality. My daughter's quiet nature was a strength, not a deficiency, and anyone who understood children would recognize that her sustained attention to creative play indicated healthy cognitive and emotional development. Melissa responded with the kind of defensive explanation that indicated she had been having similar conversations with Derek about Emma's behavior. Emma's always been an introspective child. Sarah's raised her to be independent and thoughtful. The response suggested that Derek had been offering opinions about my parenting approaches, though Melissa had never mentioned these conversations to me directly. The realization created uncomfortable awareness that my daughter had become a topic of discussion between them, possibly involving judgments about my choices as a single mother. My divorce from Emma's father had been finalized 2 years earlier, following his decision to relocate across the country for career opportunities that didn't include maintaining close relationships with his daughter. The situation had required me to balance single parenthood with demanding federal assignments, creating logistical challenges that had strengthened my relationship with Emma while teaching both of us to rely on each other during difficult periods. Sarah's done an amazing job raising Emma on her own, my father interjected, recognizing the need to redirect the conversation away from implicit criticism of my parenting choices. Single parenthood isn't easy, especially with demanding work responsibility. Derek nodded with the kind of polite agreement that indicated he was choosing not to pursue the topic further rather than genuinely reconsidering his position. The distinction was subtle but significant, suggesting that his opinions about Emma's behavior hadn't changed despite my father's gentle correction. As we gathered around the dining table for the formal meal, I found myself positioned across from Derek, providing an optimal vantage point for observing his interactions with family members throughout dinner. Emma was seated between Melissa and me, close enough for protection while allowing her to participate in family conversations at her own comfort level. The dinner conversation followed familiar patterns, covering family updates, holiday traditions, and the kind of gentle gossip that characterized gatherings where multiple generations shared stories and observations. Derek contributed appropriately to most discussions, demonstrating the social skills that had likely contributed to his professional success and initial appeal to Melissa. However, his interactions with Emma revealed a different pattern of behavior. When she asked questions about his work, he provided dismissive answers that discouraged further inquiry. When she attempted to share stories about her school activities, he redirected attention to adult topics without acknowledging her contribution. When she needed assistance reaching items on the table, he ignored her requests until other family members intervened. The pattern suggested someone who viewed children as interruptions to adult interactions, rather than family members worthy of consideration and respect. While not overtly hostile, his behavior toward Emma demonstrated a lack of patience and empathy that concerned me both as her mother and as someone trained to recognize warning signs of potential escalation. "Emma, tell everyone about your Christmas play at school," Melissa encouraged, clearly attempting to include her in the conversation despite Derek's previous lack of engagement with her story. Emma brightened at the opportunity to share her excitement about playing an angel in the school's nativity production. She described the costume she had helped create, the songs she had learned, and the proud moment when she had delivered her single line without forgetting the word. "That sounds lovely, sweetheart," my mother responded with genuine enthusiasm. "We're so proud of your performance." Derek, however, checked his phone during Emma's story, his attention clearly focused on other priorities. When she finished speaking, he immediately launched into a detailed account of his recent courtroom victory, effectively dismissing her contribution to the conversation while ensuring that attention returned to his preferred topic. The dismissal was subtle enough that other family members might not have recognized it as deliberately disrespectful, but my federal training had taught me to identify patterns of behavior that indicated deeper character issues. Someone who consistently dismissed a child's attempts at communication was demonstrating a fundamental lack of respect that often extended to other areas of interpersonal relationships. As dinner progressed, Derek's behavior toward Emma became increasingly problematic. When she accidentally knocked over her water glass while reaching for the salt, he sighed with obvious irritation and made comments about children being naturally clumsy and disruptive. When she asked to be excused to use the bathroom, he suggested that she should have planned better before sitting down to eat. Each individual incident was minor enough to avoid direct confrontation, but collectively they painted a picture of someone who viewed Emma as an inconvenience, rather than a family member deserving of patience and understanding. The pattern created an uncomfortable dynamic that was affecting Emma's comfort level and participation in family conversation. My professional instincts were becoming increasingly activated by Derek's behavior patterns, though I was hoping that Christmas dinner would conclude without any significant incidents that would require intervention. Emma had been looking forward to this family gathering for weeks, and I wanted her holiday memories to remain positive despite the underlying tensions I was observing. The critical moment arrived during dessert service, when Emma was helping my mother distribute slices of homemade apple pie to family members. In her enthusiasm to contribute to the meal, she accidentally bumped Derek's elbow while he was reaching for his coffee cup, causing a small amount of coffee to spill onto the tablecloth. Derek's reaction was immediate and disproportionate to the minor accident. His face flushed with anger as he turned toward Emma with an expression that contained none of the patience or understanding appropriate for addressing a child's innocent mistake. "You need to watch where you're going," he said sharply, his voice carrying a level of hostility that silenced other conversations around the table. "Kids who can't control themselves shouldn't be allowed around adult gatherings." Emma's face crumpled at the harsh criticism, her lower lip beginning to tremble as she processed the unexpected verbal attack. The innocent mistake that had prompted such a severe response was exactly the kind of minor accident that occurred regularly when children participated in family activity. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Derek, it was just an accident," Melissa said quietly, clearly uncomfortable with her boyfriend's reaction but uncertain about how directly to address his inappropriate response to Emma's mistake. "Accidents happen when children aren't paying attention to their behavior," Derek replied, his tone suggesting that Emma's presence at dinner had been a source of ongoing irritation that this incident had finally allowed him to express openly. The comment revealed the underlying attitude that had been influencing his previous interactions with Emma throughout the evening. He viewed her natural childhood behavior as problematic rather than normal, suggesting expectations about conduct that were unrealistic for a 6-year-old child participating in family gathering. Emma began crying quietly, overwhelmed by the unexpected hostility and unclear about what she had done wrong. The accident had been minor, and Derek's response was so disproportionate that she lacked the emotional framework to understand why an adult would react with such anger to her innocent mistake. That's when Derek made the decision that transformed an uncomfortable family moment into a federal incident. Instead of recognizing that his response had been inappropriate and apologizing for frightening a child, he chose to escalate the situation further. "Stop crying," he demanded, his voice rising with impatience. "You're old enough to control yourself." When Emma's tears continued, overwhelmed by confusion and fear, Derek reached across the table and struck her across the face with an open palm, the sound of impact silencing every other sound in the dining room. The slap wasn't severe enough to cause physical injury, but it was forceful enough to shock Emma into stunned silence while creating a moment of absolute disbelief among every adult witness to the assault. The deliberate decision to strike a child in response to tears caused by his own inappropriate behavior represented a line crossing that required immediate intervention. In that moment, every instinct I had developed through federal training and maternal protection activated simultaneously. The time for observing and hoping for improvement had ended abruptly with Derek's decision to physically assault my daughter in front of our entire family. I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew the federal credentials that had remained hidden throughout months of family gatherings where I had allowed everyone to maintain their assumptions about my work responsibility. The leather badge case opened to reveal the unmistakable authority of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, accompanied by identification that established my capacity to make arrests and enforce federal law. "FBI," I announced clearly, ensuring that every person at the table understood the authority behind my next words. "Derek Morrison, you're under arrest for assault on a minor. You have the right to remain silent." The transformation in the dining room was immediate and complete. Derek's confident demeanor dissolved into shock and confusion, as he realized that the woman he had been dismissing as an overprotective single mother was actually a federal agent with the authority to arrest him for his action. Melissa's face reflected a mixture of horror at Derek's behavior and astonishment at the revelation of my true professional identity. My parents sat in stunned silence, processing both the assault they had just witnessed and the discovery that their daughter possessed law enforcement authority they had never suspected. Emma stopped crying and stared at me with wide eyes, beginning to understand that something significant was happening but not yet comprehending the full implications of the moment when her mother's hidden strength had emerged to protect her from someone who had chosen to harm her. The foundation of doubt that had characterized my family's understanding of my career and capabilities had been shattered in a single moment of revelation that would fundamentally alter every relationship around that Christmas dinner table. The quiet strength I had maintained through years of underestimation had finally been revealed through circumstances that demanded immediate action to protect the person who mattered most to me in the world. The man who had struck my daughter was about to learn that actions have consequences, and that sometimes the people you underestimate are exactly the ones with the power to hold you accountable for crossing lines that should never be crossed. "Derek, it was just an accident," Melissa said quietly, clearly uncomfortable with her boyfriend's reaction but uncertain about how directly to address his inappropriate response to Emma's mistake. "Accidents happen when children aren't paying attention to their behavior," Derek replied, his tone suggesting that Emma's presence at dinner had been a source of ongoing irritation that this incident had finally allowed him to express openly. The comment revealed the underlying attitude that had been influencing his previous interactions with Emma throughout the evening. He viewed her natural childhood behavior as problematic rather than normal, suggesting expectations about conduct that were unrealistic for a 6-year-old child participating in family gatherings. Emma began crying quietly, overwhelmed by the unexpected hostility and unclear about what she had done wrong. The accident had been minor, and Derek's response was so disproportionate that she lacked the emotional framework to understand why an adult would react with such anger to her innocent mistake. That's when Derek made the decision that transformed an uncomfortable family moment into a federal incident. Instead of recognizing that his response had been inappropriate and apologizing for frightening a child, he chose to escalate the situation further. "Stop crying," he demanded, his voice rising with impatience. "You're old enough to control yourself." When Emma's tears continued, overwhelmed by confusion and fear, Derek reached across the table and struck her across the face with an open palm, the sound of impact silencing every other sound in the dining room. The slap wasn't severe enough to cause physical injury, but it was forceful enough to shock Emma into stunned silence while creating a moment of absolute disbelief among every adult witness to the assault. The deliberate decision to strike a child in response to tears, caused by his own inappropriate behavior, represented a line crossing that required immediate intervention. In that moment, every instinct I had developed through federal training and maternal protection activated simultaneously. The time for observing and hoping for improvement had ended abruptly with Derek's decision to physically assault my daughter in front of our entire family. I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew the federal credentials that had remained hidden throughout months of family gatherings, where I had allowed everyone to maintain their assumptions about my work responsibility. The leather badge case opened to reveal the unmistakable authority of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, accompanied by identification that established my capacity to make arrests and enforce federal law. "FBI," I announced clearly, ensuring that every person at the table understood the authority behind my next words. "Derek Morrison, you're under arrest for assault on a minor. You have the right to remain silent." The transformation in the dining room was immediate and complete. Derek's confident demeanor dissolved into shock and confusion as he realized that the woman he had been dismissing as an overprotective single mother was actually a federal agent with the authority to arrest him for his action. Melissa's face reflected a mixture of horror at Derek's behavior and astonishment at the revelation of my true professional identity. My parents sat in stunned silence, processing both the assault they had just witnessed and the discovery that their daughter possessed law enforcement authority they had never suspected. Emma stopped crying and stared at me with wide eyes, beginning to understand that something significant was happening but not yet comprehending the full implications of the moment when her mother's hidden strength had emerged to protect her from someone who had chosen to harm her. The foundation of doubt that had characterized my family's understanding of my career and capabilities had been shattered in a single moment of revelation that would fundamentally alter every relationship around that Christmas dinner table. The quiet strength I had maintained through years of underestimation had finally been revealed through circumstances that demanded immediate action to protect the person who mattered most to me in the world. The man who had struck my daughter was about to learn that actions have consequences, and that sometimes the people you underestimate are exactly the ones with the power to hold you accountable for crossing lines that should never be crossed. The sound of Derek's handcuffs clicking into place marked the end of his presence in our family home, but the beginning of a much more complex reckoning that would extend far beyond the immediate consequences of his arrest. As the local officers led him through the front door toward the waiting patrol car, I watched through the window as he turned back one final time, his expression a mixture of disbelief and rage that someone he had dismissed as powerless had possessed the authority to hold him accountable for his actions. Emma remained close to my side as we observed his departure, her small hand finding mine while she processed the dramatic conclusion to an evening that had begun with excitement about Christmas dinner and ended with her mother revealing capabilities that transformed her understanding of adult authority and protection. The experience had been traumatic, but it had also demonstrated that actions have consequences, and that adults who choose to harm children will face justice from other adults with the power to ensure accountability. The house fell into a different kind of silence once Derek was removed from the premises, a quiet that carried relief rather than tension as family members began to process both the assault they had witnessed and the revelation of my professional identity that had enabled swift intervention. The Christmas decorations that had seemed festive hours earlier now provided a surreal backdrop for conversations about federal law enforcement, domestic violence, and the complex dynamics of family protection. My mother approached me with an expression that combined maternal concern with newfound respect for capabilities she was only beginning to understand. "Sarah, what happens now? Will Derek face serious charges for what he did to Emma?" The question reflected both genuine concern for Emma's well-being and curiosity about legal processes that existed outside most people's direct experience. My family's previous understanding of law enforcement had been limited to television portrayals and occasional interactions with local police, creating knowledge gaps about federal jurisdiction and the specific procedures that governed assault cases involving minors. "Mom, Derek will be processed through federal detention facilities tonight, and formal charges will be filed tomorrow morning," I explained, recognizing that family members deserved clear information about the legal proceedings that would follow from their witness of assault. Assault on a minor carries serious penalties, particularly when committed in the presence of multiple witnesses who can testify about the circumstance. My father, whose professional experience as a school principal had provided some familiarity with child protection protocols, nodded with understanding that reflected decades of dealing with situations where adult behavior had threatened student safety. "Sarah, will Emma need to provide testimony about what happened? I know that can be difficult for children." The concern demonstrated his understanding that legal proceedings, while necessary for justice, could create additional stress for young victims who had already experienced trauma. His question also reflected recognition that my professional expertise would guide family decisions about Emma's involvement in prosecution, while prioritizing her emotional well-being throughout the process. "Dad, Emma's testimony may not be necessary given the number of adult witnesses present during the assault," I replied, appreciating his concern while explaining how witness testimony would support prosecution without requiring a 6-year-old to relive traumatic experience. "However, if her testimony becomes necessary, the federal system has specialized protocols for interviewing child witnesses that minimize additional trauma." Melissa, who had remained unusually quiet since acknowledging Derek's actions, finally addressed the broader implications of the evening's events for her own life and future decisions. "Sarah, I need to apologize for bringing someone into our family who could hurt Emma. I should have recognized the warning signs about his character." The apology reflected genuine remorse rather than defensive justification, indicating that witnessing Derek's assault had fundamentally altered her perception of his character and their relationship. Her willingness to accept responsibility for introducing a dangerous person into family gatherings demonstrated personal growth and renewed prioritization of family protection over romantic attachment. "Melissa, recognizing problematic behavior patterns requires experience that most people don't develop unless they encounter dangerous individuals professionally, I responded, hoping to provide perspective while acknowledging her genuine concern about judgment error. Derek was skilled at presenting himself as charming and successful while concealing controlling and violent tendencies underneath surface appeal. The explanation addressed both my sister's guilt about dating choices and the broader reality that individuals with harmful intentions often possess sophisticated abilities to mask their true character during initial relationship phases. Derek's confident presentation and professional credentials had provided effective camouflage for personality traits that became apparent only through extended observation or crisis situation. Emma, who had been listening to adult conversations while staying physically close for comfort and security, looked up at me with the kind of direct question that children ask when seeking understanding about frightening experiences. "Mommy, why did Derek hit me? I didn't mean to spill the coffee." The question highlighted the fundamental innocence that made Derek's assault so particularly egregious while demonstrating the confusion that children experience when adult behavior violates their understanding of appropriate responses to minor accidents. Her need for explanation created an opportunity to reinforce important lessons about personal safety and adult responsibility. "Emma, Derek hit you because he has problems controlling his anger, not because you did anything wrong," I explained, kneeling to her level to provide the direct eye contact and physical proximity that children need when processing traumatic experience. Adults should never hit children regardless of what happens. When someone spills something by accident, the appropriate response is to clean it up and continue with dinner. The explanation established clear boundaries about acceptable adult behavior while reinforcing that she bore no responsibility for Derek's choice to respond violently to an innocent mistake. The lesson served immediate emotional needs while providing foundational understanding about personal safety and appropriate expectations for adult conduct. My mother, observing this exchange between grandmother and granddaughter, addressed the broader family implications of the evening's revelations. "Sarah, we owe you a significant apology for not understanding the importance and difficulty of your work. We've been treating you like someone who needed guidance when you've been protecting families and solving cases that keep entire communities safe." The acknowledgement represented a fundamental shift in family dynamics from protective concern based on incomplete information to respectful recognition of professional competence and personal judgment. The crisis had created an opportunity for authentic relationships based on accurate understanding rather than well-intentioned but misguided attempts to influence career choices. "Mom, you were trying to protect me because you love me," I replied, recognizing that family concern had stemmed from caring rather than lack of confidence in my ability. "I maintained operational security to protect all of you, but that meant you couldn't understand the context for decisions I made about work and personal safety." The conversation highlighted how professional requirements for confidentiality could create family misunderstandings while serving legitimate security purposes. My decision to allow family members to believe I worked in administrative roles had protected both operational effectiveness and their peace of mind, but it had also prevented them from understanding the skills and experience that informed my parenting choices and personal relationships. As we began cleaning up the disrupted Christmas dinner and processing the emotional aftermath of Derek's assault and arrest, I reflected on how the evening's events had simultaneously revealed hidden family strengths and eliminated a genuine threat to Emma's safety. The foundation of doubt about my capabilities had been replaced by family support based on accurate understanding of my professional responsibilities and personal judgment. The spark of determination that had ignited my decision to pursue federal law enforcement, despite family concerns, had been validated through circumstances that required immediate application of both professional training and maternal protective instincts. The work that my family had viewed as unnecessarily dangerous had proven essential for protecting the person who mattered most to me in the world. Emma, gradually returning to her normal curiosity as the immediate crisis concluded, asked the kind of question that demonstrated her resilient spirit and natural intelligence. "Mommy, do you catch bad guys like Derek every day at your job?" The question provided an opportunity to explain my professional responsibilities in age-appropriate terms while reinforcing lessons about justice and protection that the evening's events had illustrated dramatically. Her interest in my work reflected both natural childhood curiosity and newfound understanding that her mother possessed capabilities she hadn't previously recognized. "Emma, I work on different kinds of cases that help protect people and communities," I explained, choosing language that conveyed purpose without providing details that might create anxiety about my daily activity. "Some cases involve catching people who hurt others, some involve stopping people who steal money, and some involve preventing dangerous people from carrying out plans that could harm many families." The explanation satisfied her immediate curiosity while establishing foundational understanding about law enforcement work that served broader community protection rather than personal power or authority. The lesson reinforced concepts about justice and accountability while maintaining age-appropriate boundaries about professional details. My father, who had been observing Emma's questions and my responses, addressed the family dynamic that the crisis had revealed. "Sarah, we've been underestimating both your professional capabilities and your parenting judgment. Emma is clearly thriving under your guidance, and your work is making important contributions to community safety." The recognition represented an acknowledgement that single parenthood combined with demanding federal assignments had produced positive outcomes rather than the concerning challenges that family members had feared. Emma's confident questions and resilient processing of traumatic events demonstrated healthy emotional development that reflected effective parenting rather than the instability that relatives had worried might result from unconventional career choices. As local law enforcement completed their initial reports and departed from our home, I began explaining to family members what would occur during the prosecution process while ensuring they understood their roles as witnesses and the timeline for legal proceedings. The conversation provided practical information while reinforcing that Derek's assault would face full legal consequences through established federal procedure. "The federal prosecutor will contact each of you within the next few days to schedule formal witness interviews," I explained, ensuring that family members understood their importance to the case while preparing them for professional interactions with legal officials. "Your testimony about Derek's behavior throughout the evening, his assault on Emma, and the circumstances surrounding his arrest will be essential for prosecution." Melissa nodded with understanding that reflected both acceptance of legal responsibilities and continued processing of guilt about bringing Derek into family gatherings. "Sarah, will the prosecution affect Derek's legal career? I know that sounds terrible after what he did to Emma, but I'm trying to understand all the implications." The question demonstrated her continued struggle to balance concern for Derek's future with recognition that his assault on Emma required serious consequences. Her inquiry also reflected practical awareness that criminal convictions would affect professional licensing and career prospects for someone whose livelihood depended on legal standing and client trust. "Melissa, assault convictions typically result in professional sanctions including potential disbarment, depending on state bar association policies," I replied, providing factual information while emphasizing that career consequences resulted from Derek's choices rather than prosecution decisions. "Legal professionals are held to higher standards of conduct because clients must trust their judgment and character." The explanation reinforced that Derek's career difficulties would stem directly from his decision to assault a child rather than from family decisions to cooperate with prosecution. The lesson served both immediate practical purposes and broader educational objectives about personal responsibility and professional accountability. As Christmas evening concluded with family members gradually returning to their respective homes, carrying with them fundamentally altered perceptions of my capabilities and Emma's resilience, I reflected on how crisis situations could strengthen rather than damage family relationships when core values aligned around protection of innocent people. The spark of determination that had originally driven my decision to pursue federal law enforcement, despite family concerns, had been validated through circumstances that required immediate application of professional training for personal protection. The work that relatives had viewed as unnecessarily dangerous had proven essential when someone chose to threaten the safety of my daughter. Emma, preparing for bed with the kind of routine that provided stability after dramatic events, looked up at me with an expression that combined gratitude with newfound understanding of her mother's strength and authority. "Mommy, I'm glad you're strong enough to stop bad people who try to hurt kids." The simple statement encapsulated both her emotional processing of the evening's events and her growing understanding that adults have responsibilities to protect children from harm. Her confidence in my ability to ensure her safety demonstrated that the traumatic experience had been balanced by lessons about justice and protection that would serve her understanding of appropriate adult behavior throughout her development. The foundation of doubt about my professional capabilities had been permanently replaced by family respect based on demonstrated competence during crisis situations. The weight of family expectations had been transformed into family support for work that protected communities while ensuring that those who chose to harm innocent people faced appropriate consequences for their actions. The spark of determination had been validated through circumstances that proved both the necessity and effectiveness of choosing paths that others might not understand but that served essential purposes for community safety and family protection. The federal courthouse in downtown Portland stood against the gray January sky like a monument to justice, its granite columns and imposing architecture designed to convey the weight and permanence of legal proceedings that would determine Derek Morrison's future. 3 weeks had passed since the Christmas dinner assault, and today marked the preliminary hearing that would establish the formal charges and set the trajectory for prosecution that would test both the strength of our case and Derek's continued belief that his professional credentials could shield him from consequence. I arrived at the courthouse 90 minutes before the scheduled hearing, accompanied by Assistant United States Attorney Rachel Chen, whose reputation for prosecuting domestic violence cases had earned respect throughout the federal legal community. Her meticulous preparation and comprehensive understanding of witness testimony had transformed what might have been a simple assault case into a thorough examination of Derek's pattern of controlling and manipulative behavior that extended beyond the single incident at our family dinner. Emma remained at home with my mother, who had insisted on providing childcare during legal proceedings to ensure that my daughter could maintain normal routines, while the adults handled the complex process of seeking justice for the harm she had experienced. The arrangement reflected the family unity that had emerged from the crisis, with relatives now understanding their roles in supporting both Emma's emotional recovery and the legal accountability that Derek's actions had necessitated. The courthouse lobby buzzed with the quiet conversations of attorneys, defendants, and family members navigating various stages of federal legal proceedings. The atmosphere carried a sense of serious purpose that reflected the gravity of cases handled through federal jurisdiction, creating an environment where Derek's confident social presentation would prove irrelevant to the methodical evaluation of evidence and witness testimony that characterized professional legal proceedings. Attorney Chen reviewed our case materials one final time while we waited in the witness preparation room, her thorough approach ensuring that every detail of Derek's behavior and the family dinner assault had been documented with the precision necessary for successful prosecution. Her questions during our previous meetings had revealed the extent to which Derek's Christmas dinner conduct represented a pattern of escalating aggression rather than an isolated incident triggered by unusual circumstance. Agent Mitchell, your family members' witness statements provide compelling evidence about Derek's behavior throughout the evening leading up to the assault, Attorney Chen observed, organizing the testimony that would establish context for Derek's final act of striking Emma. His dismissive treatment of your daughter, his inappropriate responses to minor accidents, and his escalating irritation with normal childhood behavior all support the conclusion that his assault was deliberate rather than impulsive. The legal analysis highlighted how professional training in behavioral observation had enabled me to document Derek's concerning patterns, while family members had focused on maintaining social harmony during Christmas dinner. The combination of law enforcement expertise and family witness testimony created a comprehensive record that would prove difficult for Derek's defense team to dispute or minimize. Derek arrived at the courthouse accompanied by his defense attorney Marcus Webb, whose expensive suit and confident demeanor suggested the kind of legal representation that individuals with significant financial resources employed when facing serious criminal charges. His presence indicated that Derek had retained experienced counsel rather than accepting public defender services, demonstrating both his understanding of the legal jeopardy he faced and his access to resources that many defendants lack. The preliminary hearing began promptly at 10 o'clock with Judge Patricia Hawkins presiding over proceedings that would determine whether sufficient evidence existed to proceed with formal prosecution. Judge Hawkins's reputation for thorough case evaluation and fair treatment of both prosecution and defense arguments had earned respect throughout the federal legal community, ensuring that Derek would receive appropriate due process while the evidence was evaluated objectively. Attorney Chen presented the prosecution's case with methodical precision, beginning with testimony from family members who had witnessed Derek's behavior throughout Christmas dinner before addressing the specific circumstances of his assault on Emma. Her opening statement established the legal framework while providing context that would help the judge understand how the evening's events had unfolded from social gathering to criminal incident. Your Honor, the evidence will demonstrate that Derek Morrison committed assault on a 6-year-old child in response to an innocent accident that required patience rather than violence. Attorney Chen stated, her presentation establishing both the legal elements of the charges and the moral framework that made Derek's actions particularly egregious. Multiple witnesses will testify about defendants' escalating hostility toward the victim throughout the evening, culminating in deliberate physical assault that shocked every adult present. My testimony provided detailed account of Derek's behavior patterns and the specific circumstances of his assault on Emma, drawing on both professional training in behavioral observation and maternal knowledge of my daughter's personality and typical conduct. The combination of law enforcement expertise and personal experience created compelling evidence that Derek's characterization of the incident as discipline or momentary frustration misrepresented both his intentions and Emma's behavior. Agent Mitchell, please describe Derek Morrison's interactions with your daughter throughout Christmas dinner prior to the assault. Attorney Chen requested, guiding my testimony toward establishing the pattern of inappropriate behavior that had preceded the physical violence. Derek consistently dismissed Emma's attempts to participate in family conversations, ignored her requests for assistance during dinner, and showed visible irritation with normal childhood behavior including accidental spills and questions about adult topics. I testify, maintaining the professional composure that federal training had developed while describing conduct that had threatened my daughter's emotional and physical safety. The detailed testimony demonstrated how Derek's assault had represented escalation of problematic attitudes, rather than an isolated incident caused by unusual circumstance. His pattern of treating Emma as an unwelcome interruption to adult activities had created the foundation for violence, when her accidental coffee spill provided an excuse for expressing hostility that had been building throughout the evening. My father's testimony corroborated the behavioral patterns while providing additional perspective on Derek's inappropriate responses to normal family dinner dynamics. His decades of experience managing student behavior as a school principal had provided expertise in recognizing concerning adult attitudes toward children, lending additional credibility to observations about Derek's escalating hostility. Derek Morrison displayed consistent impatience with Emma's presence and normal childhood behavior throughout dinner, my father testified, his professional background enabling him to identify warning signs that other family members might have missed. His response to minor accidents and innocent questions showed concerning lack of empathy and understanding about appropriate adult behavior toward children. Melissa's testimony proved particularly powerful, because her relationship with Derek had provided extended opportunities to observe his character while her family loyalty created credibility as someone who would not fabricate evidence against a romantic partner. Her reluctant but honest description of Derek's controlling behavior and dismissive attitudes toward Emma established patterns that extended beyond the single evening when assault had occurred. Derek often made critical comments about Emma's behavior and suggested that Sarah was too permissive as a parent, Melissa testified, her voice reflecting both embarrassment about her previous romantic choices and determination to support family protection. I realize now that his attitudes toward children were problematic, but I didn't recognize the warning signs until he actually struck Emma. Derek's defense attorney attempted to minimize the assault while characterizing it as momentary frustration rather than deliberate violence, suggesting that his client's professional standing and lack of previous criminal record should influence sentencing consideration. The defense strategy focused on portraying Derek as someone whose career and reputation would suffer disproportionately from criminal conviction, rather than addressing the harm he had inflicted on Emma. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that his response to the incident was inappropriate, but this represents an isolated mistake by someone whose professional career has been dedicated to upholding legal standards. Attorney Webb argued, attempting to frame Derek's assault as aberrant behavior rather than character revelation. Mr. Morrison's legal training and professional responsibilities demonstrate his commitment to appropriate conduct, and this single incident should not overshadow years of ethical practice. The defense argument revealed Derek's continued failure to accept full responsibility for his actions while demonstrating his belief that professional credentials should shield him from consequences that ordinary citizens would face for identical conduct. His characterization of deliberate assault as an appropriate response rather than criminal violence showed persistent inability to understand the gravity of striking a child. Judge Hawkins's response to the defense arguments demonstrated judicial understanding that professional standing created additional rather than reduced responsibility for appropriate conduct, particularly when children's safety was involved. Her questions to Derek's attorney revealed skepticism about arguments that legal training should excuse rather than enhance accountability for violent behavior. Attorney Webb, your client's legal education should have provided superior understanding of appropriate conduct and respect for vulnerable individuals. Judge Hawkins observed, her tone indicating that Derek's professional background would influence sentencing in directions opposite to those his defense team had anticipated. Legal professionals are held to higher standards precisely because their training should prevent rather than excuse harmful behavior. The judicial response marked the first breakthrough moment in prosecution proceedings, indicating that Derek's assumption about professional privilege protecting him from consequences had been fundamentally mistaken. His confident belief that legal credentials would enable him to avoid serious penalties was being replaced by reality that professional standing created enhanced rather than diminished responsibility for appropriate conduct. Attorney Chen's closing argument synthesized the witness testimony while emphasizing that Derek's assault represented deliberate choice rather than momentary lapse in judgment, creating legal and moral framework that demanded appropriate consequences regardless of his professional background or previous conduct record. Your Honor, the evidence demonstrates that Derek Morrison made a conscious decision to strike a 6-year-old child who had committed no offense beyond accidentally spilling coffee. Attorney Chen summarized her presentation, establishing both legal elements and moral context that made Derek's actions inexcusable regardless of mitigating factors his defense team had proposed. Judge Hawkins's preliminary ruling established that sufficient evidence existed to proceed with formal prosecution while setting bail conditions that reflected the court's assessment of Derek's character and potential danger to community members, particularly children. The decision marked validation of our family's decision to pursue full legal accountability rather than accepting private apologies or informal resolution. The court finds probable cause to believe that Derek Morrison committed assault on a minor as charged, Judge Hawkins announced, her ruling establishing the legal foundation for prosecution while sending clear message about judicial attitudes toward violence against children. Bail is set at $50,000 with conditions including no contact with the victim or her family members and mandatory anger management counseling pending trial. The bail conditions reflected judicial understanding that Derek's behavior represented potential ongoing threat rather than isolated incident, creating legal framework that would protect Emma and our family from retaliation while ensuring that Derek faced appropriate supervision during the prosecution. As we departed the courthouse following the successful preliminary hearing, Attorney Chen expressed confidence about prosecution prospects while preparing our family for the continued legal proceedings that would culminate in Derek's trial and sentence. Her thorough preparation and strategic presentation had established strong foundation for achieving justice while demonstrating that federal prosecutors possessed both expertise and determination to protect children from adult violence. Agent Mitchell, today's proceedings establish excellent foundation for successful prosecution, Attorney Chen observed, her professional assessment providing reassurance about legal outcomes while acknowledging the continued work required to achieve full accountability. Derek's defense strategy of minimizing his actions while emphasizing his professional background has proven ineffective with Judge Hawkins, and I expect similar responses from trial jury members. The breakthrough moment represented validation that pursuing full legal consequences, rather than accepting informal apologies, had been the appropriate response to Derek's assault on Emma. His assumption that professional credentials and confident presentation would enable him to avoid serious penalties had proven fundamentally mistaken when confronted with methodical legal proceedings and comprehensive witness testimony. Emma's safety had been protected through professional legal processes, while family unity had been strengthened through shared commitment to accountability and justice. The foundation of doubt about my capabilities had been permanently replaced by family respect for both professional competence and maternal judgment that had guided appropriate responses to crisis situations. The spark of determination that had driven my pursuit of federal law enforcement career despite family concerns had been validated through circumstances that required immediate application of professional training for personal protection. The work that relatives had previously viewed as unnecessarily dangerous had proven essential when someone chose to threaten the safety of my daughter and required swift, decisive intervention to prevent further harm. The weeks following Derek's preliminary hearing brought unexpected reactions from various segments of our extended community, revealing how public awareness of domestic violence cases could divide opinion along lines that had little relationship to the actual evidence or legal merits of prosecution. The local legal community, neighborhood associations, and even some family friends began expressing perspectives that ranged from unwavering support for protecting children to concerning suggestions that Derek's professional standing should influence legal outcomes. My supervisor at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent in Charge David Martinez, requested a private meeting to discuss how my involvement in a high-profile domestic violence case might affect ongoing federal investigations and my professional responsibilities within the Bureau. His concerns stemmed from legitimate operational security considerations rather than doubts about my professional judgment, but the conversation highlighted how personal circumstances could create professional complications, even when actions had been entirely appropriate. Agent Mitchell, the media attention surrounding Derek Morrison's case has created some visibility around your identity that could potentially compromise ongoing undercover operations, Special Agent Martinez explained during our meeting in his secure office at the federal building. We need to evaluate whether reassignment to different investigative units would better serve both your safety and operational effectiveness. The professional implications of pursuing justice for Emma had not been anticipated during the immediate crisis response, but they represented legitimate concerns about how public awareness of my law enforcement identity could affect future assignments that required operational anonymity. The revelation of my federal credentials during Derek's arrest had necessarily ended my ability to conduct certain types of undercover investigations that depended on maintaining civilian cover identities. Sir, I understand the operational security concern, and I am prepared to accept reassignment to investigative roles that do not require deep cover work, I respond, recognizing that protecting Emma had required choices that would influence my career trajectory, while maintaining that those choices had been both necessary and appropriate under the circumstances. Special Agent Martinez's response indicated that Bureau leadership viewed my actions during the Christmas dinner incident as exemplary law enforcement conduct rather than problematic personal involvement in legal proceedings. His concern focused on operational effectiveness rather than professional discipline, reflecting institutional understanding that federal agents must sometimes apply their training and authority to protect family members from immediate threat. Agent Mitchell, your response to the assault situation demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and decisive action that the Bureau expects from experienced agents, he clarified, his tone indicating professional approval rather than criticism. The reassignment considerations are purely operational, designed to maximize your effectiveness in cases where your identity has not been compromised through necessary protective action. The conversation provided reassurance that pursuing justice for Emma would not damage my federal career while acknowledging that certain investigative opportunities might no longer be available due to increased public awareness of my law enforcement identity. The professional consequences represented acceptable costs for ensuring my daughter's safety and holding Derek accountable for his violent behavior. Derek's law firm,
Langford and Associates, issued a public statement expressing support for their employee while carefully avoiding any direct comment on the legal proceedings that might prejudice his case or create additional legal liability for the firm. The statement revealed the complex position that professional organizations faced when employees became involved in criminal cases that could affect both individual and institutional reputation. Langford and Associates maintains confidence in Derek Morrison's professional competence and ethical standards, while respecting the legal process that will determine the facts surrounding recent allegations, the firm's managing partner announced through their public relations department. We believe that personal circumstances should be distinguished from professional performance, and we continue to support Mr. Morrison during this challenging period. The statement reflected the firm's attempt to balance loyalty to a productive employee with recognition that criminal charges could create liability issues and reputational damage if Derek's guilt became established through legal proceedings. Their carefully worded support indicated awareness that domestic violence allegations required delicate handling, regardless of their personal opinions about Derek's character. However, the firm's public statement generated significant backlash from family advocacy organizations and legal professionals who argued that law firms had moral obligations to take stronger positions against attorneys who faced credible allegations of violence against children. The controversy highlighted broader debates about professional responsibility and institutional accountability when colleagues faced serious criminal charges. Jennifer Walsh, director of the Children's Protection Coalition, issued a public response that challenged legal institutions to demonstrate genuine commitment to protecting vulnerable populations, rather than merely protecting professional colleagues. Her statement created additional pressure on Derek's firm, while providing public support for our family's decision to pursue criminal prosecution, rather than accepting private resolution. Legal professionals who commit violence against children betray the fundamental principles of justice and protection that should guide their professional conduct, Dr. Walsh declared in her public statement. Law firms that prioritize colleague loyalty over child safety send concerning messages about institutional values and commitment to protecting vulnerable community members. The public advocacy created an environment where Derek's case became symbolic of broader issues related to professional accountability and institutional responses to domestic violence allegations.
While this attention provided validation for our pursuit of justice, it also created pressures and expectations that extended beyond the specific circumstances of Emma's assault. Melissa received significant criticism from some of Derek's colleagues and mutual friends, who suggested that family loyalty should have prevented her from cooperating with prosecution efforts that could damage his legal career and professional reputation. These conversations revealed how domestic violence cases could create social pressures that discouraged victims and witnesses from pursuing appropriate legal remedies. Some people at Derek's firm have been asking me whether I really needed to testify against him. Melissa confided during one of our regular conversations about the ongoing legal proceedings. They seem to think that family disputes should be handled privately rather than through criminal prosecution. The pressure on Melissa highlighted how domestic violence perpetrators often benefited from social expectations that family members should protect each other from legal consequences, rather than supporting accountability for harmful behavior. The suggestion that Derek's assault on Emma constituted a family dispute rather than criminal conduct revealed fundamental misunderstanding about appropriate responses to violence against children. "Melissa, what Derek did to Emma was not a family dispute," I responded firmly, recognizing the importance of reinforcing appropriate boundaries about domestic violence and legal accountability. "It was criminal assault on a child, and the people suggesting you should protect him from consequences are prioritizing his reputation over Emma's safety and the prevention of future violence." My mother received unexpected support from her church community, where congregation members had observed her dedication to Emma's care and recognized the strength required to support criminal prosecution, despite potential social complications. The religious community's response provided valuable emotional support while demonstrating how institutional values could align with family protection rather than conflict resolution that ignored accountability. Pastor Michael Roberts approached my mother after Sunday services to express both personal support and congregational commitment to supporting families affected by domestic violence. His outreach reflected religious community understanding that protecting children required supporting legal accountability rather than encouraging forgiveness that enabled continued harmful behavior. Patricia, our congregation stands with your family during this difficult time, Pastor Roberts assured my mother during their conversation. Protecting children from violence is a moral imperative that transcends social pressures to maintain peace through avoiding conflict. Sarah's actions demonstrated exactly the kind of courage and commitment to justice that our faith community valued. The religious support provided my mother with confidence that her decision to support Emma's protection through criminal prosecution aligned with spiritual values rather than conflicting with expectations about forgiveness and reconciliation. The distinction between accountability and vengeance became important for maintaining family unity while pursuing appropriate legal remedies. Emma's school principal, Dr. Maria Rodriguez, requested a meeting to discuss support services and safety protocols that could help Emma process her traumatic experience while maintaining normal educational routine. The school's proactive approach reflected institutional understanding that domestic violence affecting students required comprehensive support, rather than simply hoping that legal proceedings would resolve all related issues. Agent Mitchell, we want to ensure that Emma has access to counseling resources and modified academic expectations if she needs additional time to process her experience. Dr. Rodriguez explained during our meeting, children who witness or experience violence sometimes need educational accommodations while they work through trauma with professional support. The school's response demonstrated how community institutions could provide valuable support for families navigating legal proceedings while ensuring that children's immediate needs for stability and normalcy were maintained throughout the prosecution process. Emma's continued academic success became both a priority and a measure of her resilience during a challenging period. Emma herself displayed remarkable emotional strength while processing the adult conflicts that surrounded Derek's prosecution, asking thoughtful questions about justice and accountability that reflected her growing understanding of appropriate consequences for harmful behavior. Her resilience provided motivation for continuing prosecution efforts while demonstrating that children could recover from traumatic experiences when surrounded by consistent adult support and protection. Mommy, will Derek have to go to jail for hitting me? Emma asked during one of our bedtime conversations about the ongoing legal proceedings. I hope he learns that hitting kids is wrong so he doesn't hurt other children. Her question revealed both natural curiosity about legal outcomes and genuine concern for other potential victims rather than vindictive desires for Derek's punishment. The mature perspective demonstrated healthy emotional processing while reinforcing that prosecution served broader protective purposes beyond addressing her individual experience. Federal prosecutors received support from multiple family advocacy organizations that recognized Derek's case as an opportunity to demonstrate that professional credentials did not create immunity from accountability when violence against children occurred. The broader advocacy created additional resources and expertise that strengthened prosecution efforts while ensuring that Emma's case contributed to improved protection for other vulnerable children. Attorney Rachel Chen reported that advocacy organizations' support had provided access to ex-witnesses and research resources that would enhance prosecution effectiveness while demonstrating community commitment to holding perpetrators accountable regardless of their social or professional standing. The additional support created confidence that Derek's prosecution would achieve appropriate outcomes while serving broader protective purposes. Agent Mitchell, the advocacy community support has provided our prosecution team with expert testimony about domestic violence patterns and child trauma that will help the jury understand both the immediate harm Derek caused and the broader implications of his behavior. Attorney Chen explained during our preparation meeting. This case has become an opportunity to demonstrate that professional standing creates enhanced rather than diminished responsibility for appropriate conduct. The community support network that emerged around Emma's case demonstrated how individual acts of courage could inspire broader institutional commitment to protecting vulnerable populations while holding harmful individuals accountable through appropriate legal process. The skeptics who had initially questioned the necessity of criminal prosecution were being answered by supporters who understood the broader implications of allowing violence against children to proceed without serious consequences. The foundation of doubt, about pursuing full legal accountability had been replaced by growing recognition that protecting children required community-wide commitment to supporting victims and witnesses rather than pressuring families to resolve violence through private negotiations that avoided public accountability. The weight of family expectations had evolved into family determination to ensure that Emma's experience contributed to broader protection for other children who might face similar threats from adults who believed their social standing should shield them from consequences. Determination that had driven my initial decision to arrest Derek had been sustained and strengthened through discovering unexpected sources of support while maintaining resolve despite social pressures that favored protecting perpetrators over holding them accountable for their harmful choices. The skeptics and supporters had revealed themselves through their responses to Emma's case, creating clear understanding about which community members prioritized child protection over social convenience. The intensive preparation for Derek Morrison's criminal trial began in earnest during the third week of February, transforming what had initially appeared to be a straightforward assault case into a comprehensive examination of domestic violence patterns, professional accountability standards, and the legal frameworks designed to protect children from adult violence. Assistant United States Attorney Rachel Chen had assembled a prosecution team that included specialist investigators, expert witnesses, and victim advocacy professionals whose collective expertise would ensure that Derek's trial addressed both the specific assault on Emma and the broader implications of his behavior patterns. The federal prosecutor's office occupied the 7th floor of the downtown courthouse complex, providing secure meeting spaces where prosecution team members could review evidence, prepare witness testimony, and develop strategic approaches to presenting our case effectively to jury members who would ultimately determine Derek's guilt and appropriate sentencing. The preparation process required balancing comprehensive documentation of Derek's harmful behavior with protection of Emma's emotional well-being throughout proceedings that could extend over several months. Amanda Foster, a licensed child psychologist specializing in trauma recovery and legal testimony procedures, joined the prosecution team to ensure that Emma's participation in trial proceedings would be managed with appropriate safeguards for her psychological development and emotional stability. Her expertise provided essential guidance about minimizing additional trauma while ensuring that Emma's voice could be heard when necessary for achieving justice and accountability. Agent Mitchell, our primary objective is ensuring that Emma's testimony serves justice while protecting her from additional psychological harm, Dr. Foster explained during our initial consultation meeting. Federal courts have established protocols for child witnesses that allow their perspectives to be included in prosecution without subjecting them to intimidating cross-examination procedures that could cause lasting emotional damage. The child advocacy protocols reflected legal system recognition that young victims required specialized protections during criminal proceedings, acknowledging that traditional courtroom procedures designed for adult witnesses could prove traumatic for children who had already experienced violence and needed continued stability during recovery process. Emma's well-being remained the paramount consideration throughout all preparation activities. My own preparation for trial testimony required extensive review of federal law enforcement protocols, documentation procedure, and expert witness standards that would establish my credibility while ensuring that my professional expertise enhanced rather than overshadowed the fundamental facts of Derek's assault on Emma. The prosecution team needed to present my law enforcement background as providing valuable observational skills without suggesting that special training was required to recognize inappropriate adult behavior toward children. Detective Patricia Morales from the Portland Police Bureau's Domestic Violence Unit provided additional expertise about behavioral patterns commonly observed in cases involving adult violence against children, contributing perspective that would help jury members understand how Derek's Christmas dinner conduct had followed recognizable escalation patterns that frequently preceded physical assault. Her professional experience complemented my federal background while providing local law enforcement credibility. Agent Mitchell, Derek Morrison's behavior throughout Christmas dinner demonstrates classic escalation patterns that domestic violence specialists recognize as warning signs for potential physical violence, Detective Morales observed during our case review meeting. His dismissive treatment of Emma, inappropriate responses to minor accidents, and visible irritation with normal childhood behavior all indicate underlying hostility that was seeking expression through increasingly aggressive response. The behavioral analysis provided crucial context for understanding Derek's assault as the culmination of problematic attitudes rather than an isolated incident caused by unusual circumstance. The pattern recognition would help jury members understand that Derek's violence represented character revelation rather than momentary lapse in judgment, supporting prosecution arguments for serious consequences that reflected the deliberate nature of his harmful choices. Attorney Chen's trial preparation strategy emphasized presenting comprehensive evidence about Derek's behavior patterns while maintaining focus on the specific assault that had triggered federal criminal charge. The approach required balancing detailed documentation of concerning conduct with clear presentation of legal elements that establish Derek's guilt beyond reasonable doubt, according to federal assault statute. Our prosecution strategy will demonstrate that Derek Morrison's assault on Emma represented the predictable outcome of escalating hostility rather than an impulsive response to unexpected circumstances, Attorney Chen explained during team planning session. The comprehensive evidence about his behavior throughout Christmas dinner will establish intent and deliberation, while the witness testimony will confirm that his actions constituted criminal assault under federal jurisdiction. The legal framework required proving that Derek had deliberately chosen to strike Emma rather than accidentally causing harm during legitimate disciplinary actions, distinguishing criminal assault from inappropriate but non-criminal responses to childhood misbehavior. The evidence clearly supported prosecution arguments about deliberate violence, but presentation required careful attention to legal standards and jury expectations about appropriate adult conduct toward children. Family members underwent extensive preparation for providing witness testimony that would establish the timeline of events, document Derek's behavioral patterns, and describe the impact of his assault on Emma and our family dynamic. The witness preparation process involved multiple practice sessions designed to ensure that testimony would be clear, comprehensive, and resistant to defense attempts to minimize Derek's actions or shift responsibility to other factors. My father's testimony required particular preparation. His professional background as a school principal provided expertise in recognizing concerning adult behavior toward children, while his personal relationship with Emma established emotional stakes in ensuring appropriate accountability for Derek's violence. The combination of professional credibility and family investment created powerful testimony that would be difficult for defense attorneys to discredit or minimize. Robert, your testimony about Derek's behavior patterns will provide crucial context for understanding how his assault on Emma represented escalation of ongoing problematic attitudes, Attorney Chen explained during witness preparation session. Your professional experience with child behavior management will help jury members understand that Derek's responses were inappropriate regardless of any minor inconveniences that Emma's presence might have created during family dinner. Melissa's preparation proved more emotionally challenging because her testimony required acknowledging that her romantic relationship with Derek had exposed Emma to someone whose character assessment had proven dangerously inaccurate. Her willingness to testify against Derek despite personal costs demonstrated family loyalty that prioritized child protection over romantic attachments, providing compelling evidence about the seriousness of Derek's assault. Melissa, your testimony about Derek's controlling behavior and dismissive attitudes toward Emma will help establish that his assault represented ongoing character issues rather than isolated poor judgment, Attorney Chen guided during preparation session. Your decision to support prosecution despite personal relationships demonstrates exactly the kind of courage that protects children from adults who choose to harm them. The preparation process also involved extensive research into Derek's professional background, social relationships, and previous incidents that might provide additional context for understanding his character and potential for future violence. Federal investigators had conducted comprehensive background checks that revealed concerning patterns in Derek's personal relationships, though no previous criminal charges that would directly support prosecution arguments. Michael Chen, a forensic psychologist specializing in domestic violence perpetrator assessment, joined the prosecution team to provide expert testimony about behavioral patterns commonly associated with adults who commit violence against children. His professional expertise would help jury members understand how Derek's Christmas dinner conduct aligned with recognized risk factors for escalating abuse and future violence. Derek Morrison's behavioral patterns during Christmas dinner demonstrate multiple indicators associated with increased risk for domestic violence escalation, Dr. Chen concluded after reviewing case materials and witness statements. His dismissive treatment of the child victim, inappropriate responses to minor accidents, and eventual physical assault represent a progression commonly observed in cases where adult perpetrators view children as legitimate targets for expressing frustration and asserting control. The expert analysis provided scientific foundation for prosecution arguments about Derek's dangerousness while establishing professional credibility that would enhance jury understanding of domestic violence dynamics. The testimony would demonstrate that Derek's assault represented recognizable patterns rather than unique circumstances that might excuse or minimize his criminal responsibility. Emma's own preparation required the most delicate handling because her testimony needed to serve justice while protecting her emotional development and psychological recovery from traumatic experiences. Foster worked closely with Emma to ensure that her participation in legal proceedings would strengthen rather than undermine her healing process while providing authentic voice about her experience of Derek's assault. Emma has demonstrated remarkable resilience and emotional intelligence throughout this process, Dr. Foster reported after completing child victim assessment procedure. Her testimony can be managed through protective protocols that allow her perspective to influence prosecution while maintaining appropriate boundaries about courtroom exposure and cross-examination procedure. The child protection protocols reflected legal system evolution toward recognizing that young victims possessed valuable perspectives about their experiences while requiring specialized safeguards to prevent additional trauma during justice-seeking processes. Emma's voice would be heard without subjecting her to intimidating defense tactics designed to discredit adult witnesses. Security preparations addressed potential safety concerns related to Derek's supporters, his access to financial resources that might enable obstruction efforts, and the possibility that media attention could create unwanted scrutiny of family members who were cooperating with prosecution. Federal marshals provided threat assessment services, while local law enforcement coordinated protective measures that would ensure witness safety throughout trial proceedings. The comprehensive preparation phase demonstrated how serious criminal cases required extensive coordination between multiple agencies, professional specialties, and community resources to ensure that justice could be achieved while protecting victims and witnesses from additional harm. The institutional support reflected legal system commitment to holding perpetrators accountable while maintaining appropriate safeguards for vulnerable participants in criminal proceedings. As trial preparation entered its final phase during late March, the prosecution team had assembled compelling evidence, prepared credible witnesses, and developed strategic presentations that would demonstrate Derek's guilt while serving broader purposes of community protection and professional accountability. The intensive preparation had transformed individual family trauma into comprehensive legal case that would establish important precedents about consequences for adults who choose to commit violence against children. The preparation phase had also strengthened family unity through shared commitment to seeking justice while protecting Emma's emotional well-being throughout challenging legal process. The collective effort required to prepare for Derek's trial had demonstrated that achieving accountability for domestic violence required community-wide coordination between legal professionals, advocacy organizations, and family members willing to prioritize child protection over social convenience.
Attorney Chen's final preparation summary reflected confidence that comprehensive evidence gathering and witness preparation had created strong foundation for successful prosecution while acknowledging that trial proceedings would still require sustained effort and strategic presentation to achieve appropriate outcomes. The preparation phase had established groundwork for justice while demonstrating institutional commitment to protecting children from adult violence, regardless of perpetrator social standing or professional credentials. The unexpected motion filed by Derek Morrison's defense team on the Friday before trial proceedings were scheduled to begin created the first serious challenge to our prosecution strategy, threatening to undermine months of careful preparation through legal arguments that could fundamentally alter how evidence would be presented to the jury. Defense attorney Marcus Webb had submitted a comprehensive brief arguing that my federal law enforcement status created constitutional issues regarding probable cause, jurisdiction, and the admissibility of evidence obtained during what he characterized as an improper arrest conducted outside official federal duties. Assistant United States Attorney Rachel Chen called an emergency meeting for Saturday morning to address the defense motion and develop appropriate responses that would preserve our prosecution strategy, while addressing legitimate legal concerns that Judge Patricia Hawkins might find compelling. The timing of the defense filing suggested strategic intent to create pressure on prosecution preparation while raising complex constitutional questions that could require extended legal research and potentially delay trial proceedings. The defense motion argues that your arrest of Derek Morrison exceeded federal jurisdiction because the assault occurred during a private family gathering rather than within the scope of federal law enforcement responsibility. Attorney Chen explained as we reviewed the defense brief in her secure conference room. They are claiming that your actions constituted unlawful detention by a federal agent acting outside proper authority, which could invalidate the arrest and potentially exclude key evidence from trial proceedings. The constitutional challenge represented sophisticated legal strategy that attempted to exploit technical jurisdictional questions rather than addressing the fundamental facts of Derek's assault on Emma. Defense arguments focused on procedural technicalities that could create reasonable doubt about prosecution evidence rather than disputing the witnesses who had observed Derek's violent behavior during Christmas dinner. The defense motion included extensive citations to federal court decisions involving off-duty law enforcement actions, constitutional limitations on federal jurisdiction, and Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable seizure that could potentially support arguments that my arrest of Derek had violated his constitutional rights. The legal research demonstrated careful preparation designed to create maximum disruption to prosecution strategy through complex constitutional arguments. Patricia Williams, a constitutional law professor at Lewis and Clark Law School who specialized in federal jurisdiction and law enforcement authority, joined our legal team as an expert consultant to address the defense constitutional challenge. Her academic expertise provided essential perspective on how federal courts had previously addressed similar jurisdictional questions involving off-duty federal agents who had made arrest during personal situations. The defense arguments mischaracterize both federal jurisdiction requirements and the circumstances surrounding Agent Mitchell's arrest of Derek Morrison. Dr. Williams concluded after reviewing the defense motion and case precedent. Federal agents retain arrest authority for federal crimes regardless of whether they are on duty, and assault on a minor constitutes a federal offense when it occurs in circumstances that affect interstate commerce or involve federal personnel. The constitutional analysis provided crucial foundation for responding to defense challenges while maintaining prosecution strategy that emphasized Derek's criminal behavior rather than technical jurisdictional questions. The expert testimony would demonstrate that my arrest had been conducted within proper federal authority, while serving legitimate law enforcement purposes of protecting a child victim from continued violence. The defense motion also raised evidentiary challenges regarding family member testimony, arguing that witness statements had been improperly influenced by my law enforcement authority, and therefore lacked the reliability required for criminal prosecution. Defense attorneys suggested that my federal credentials had intimidated family witnesses into providing exaggerated accounts of Derek's behavior that supported prosecution arguments rather than accurately describing Christmas dinner events. Detective Patricia Morales from the Portland Police Bureau provided additional perspective on the defense arguments, drawing from her extensive experience with domestic violence cases where perpetrators attempted to discredit victim and witness testimony through procedural challenges. Her professional expertise offered valuable insight into common defense strategies that attempted to shift focus from criminal behavior to alleged procedural violation. Defense arguments about witness intimidation are standard tactics in domestic violence cases where perpetrators attempt to avoid accountability by claiming that law enforcement authority influenced testimony. Detective Morales observed during our strategy session, the consistent witness statements and physical evidence clearly support prosecution arguments regardless of Agent Mitchell's professional background. The law enforcement perspective provided important context for understanding how Derek's defense strategy reflected common patterns in domestic violence cases rather than legitimate constitutional concerns about federal jurisdiction or witness reliability. The defense motion represented tactical maneuvering rather than substantive legal challenges to the evidence documenting Derek's assault on Emma. Judge Hawkins scheduled a pre-trial hearing for Monday morning to address the defense constitutional challenges and determine whether trial proceedings could begin as scheduled or would require postponement pending resolution of jurisdictional questions. The judicial decision would establish important precedents about federal agent authority during off-duty situations while determining whether our prosecution strategy could proceed without major modification. The weekend before the critical hearing required intensive legal research and brief preparation that would address every aspect of the defense constitutional arguments while maintaining focus on the fundamental issue of Derek's criminal assault on a 6-year-old child. The legal team worked through Saturday and Sunday to ensure comprehensive response that would preserve prosecution strategy while addressing legitimate judicial concerns about constitutional compliance. Emma remained unaware of the legal complexities that could potentially delay her opportunity to see Derek held accountable for striking her during Christmas dinner. My mother provided childcare during the weekend preparation sessions, ensuring that Emma maintained normal routines while adults addressed procedural challenges that threatened to complicate justice-seeking processes beyond their original scope. "Mommy, when will the judge decide about Derek's punishment for hitting me?" Emma asked during Sunday evening conversation about the approaching court proceedings. "I hope other kids will be safe from people who think hitting is okay when they get angry."
Her continued focus on protecting other potential victims rather than seeking personal vindication demonstrated emotional maturity that provided motivation for overcoming procedural obstacles that could delay accountability for Derek's harmful behavior. Emma's resilience and concern for others reinforced the importance of achieving trial outcomes that would establish consequences for adults who chose to commit violence against children. Special Agent in Charge David Martinez contacted me Sunday evening to discuss Bureau support for addressing the defense constitutional challenges, offering additional legal resources and expert testimony that could strengthen prosecution arguments about federal jurisdiction and proper law enforcement procedures. His support indicated institutional commitment to protecting agents who applied their training appropriately during personal crisis situations. Agent Mitchell, the Bureau Legal Department has reviewed the defense motion and concluded that your arrest of Derek Morrison was conducted within proper federal authority and constitutional requirements. Special Agent Martinez assured me during our telephone conversation. We will provide whatever additional resources are necessary to ensure that procedural challenges do not prevent appropriate accountability for criminal assault on your daughter. The federal support provided confidence that institutional resources would be available to address constitutional challenges while maintaining prosecution focus on Derek's criminal behavior, rather than technical jurisdictional questions. The Bureau commitment demonstrated recognition that federal agents must be able to protect family members from violence without facing career consequences or procedural obstacles that could undermine justice-seeking effort. Monday morning's pre-trial hearing attracted significant media attention as constitutional law experts, family advocacy organizations, and legal professionals observe proceedings that would establish important precedents about federal agent authority and domestic violence. Prosecution procedure. The courtroom atmosphere reflected serious consideration of complex legal questions that extended beyond the specific circumstances of Derek's assault on Emma. Defense attorney Webb presented comprehensive arguments about constitutional limitations on federal jurisdiction, citing multiple precedent cases that allegedly supported claims that my arrest of Derek had exceeded proper authority and violated Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable seizure. His presentation demonstrated sophisticated legal research while attempting to create reasonable doubt about prosecution evidence through procedural technicality. Your Honor, Agent Mitchell's arrest of my client occurred during a private family gathering where no federal crimes were being investigated and no federal law enforcement duties were being performed. Attorney Webb argued in his presentation to Judge Hawkins, the subsequent detention and evidence gathering violated constitutional protections that limit federal authority to circumstances involving legitimate federal jurisdiction. The defense arguments attempted to characterize Derek's assault on Emma as a private family matter rather than criminal conduct that warranted federal intervention, revealing fundamental misunderstanding about both federal jurisdiction requirements and appropriate responses to violence against children. The constitutional claims masked underlying attempts to avoid accountability through procedural challenges rather than addressing the evidence documenting Derek's harmful behavior. Attorney Chen's response addressed each aspect of the defense constitutional challenges while maintaining focus on the fundamental legal principle that federal agents retain arrest authority for federal crimes regardless of their duty status or the private circumstances where criminal behavior occurred. Her presentation demonstrated comprehensive understanding of federal jurisdiction requirements while emphasizing Derek's criminal responsibility for assaulting a child. Your Honor, federal agents possess arrest authority for federal crimes under all circumstances where such crimes occur within their observation, regardless of whether they are on duty or attending private social gatherings. Attorney Chen argued in response to defense constitutional claim, Agent Mitchell's arrest of Derek Morrison was conducted within proper federal authority after witnessing criminal assault that clearly violated federal statutes protecting children from violence. Williams provided expert testimony about constitutional law precedents that supported prosecution arguments while addressing defense claims about jurisdictional limitations and Fourth Amendment protection. Her academic expertise offered authoritative perspective on how federal courts had previously addressed similar questions about off-duty federal agent authority during personal situations involving criminal behavior. Federal jurisdiction for assault on minors extends to circumstances involving federal personnel, regardless of whether the federal employee is acting in official capacity at the time criminal behavior occurs. Dr. Williams testified during the hearing. Agent Mitchell's arrest of Derek Morrison was conducted within established constitutional parameters that protect both federal agent authority and defendant rights, according to proper legal procedure. The expert constitutional analysis provided compelling foundation for prosecution arguments while addressing legitimate judicial concerns about federal jurisdiction and proper arrest procedure. The testimony demonstrated that Derek's arrest had been conducted according to established legal principles rather than representing constitutional violations that could invalidate prosecution evidence. Judge Hawkins' ruling addressed the defense constitutional challenges while establishing important precedents about federal agent authority during off-duty situations involving family protection and domestic violence response. Her decision reflected careful consideration of complex legal questions while maintaining focus on fundamental principles of child protection and criminal accountability. The court finds that Agent Mitchell's arrest of Derek Morrison was conducted within proper federal authority and constitutional requirements. Judge Hawkins announced in her ruling, federal agents retain arrest authority for federal crimes regardless of duty status, and assault on a minor clearly constitutes federal offense warranting appropriate law enforcement response. The defense motion to exclude evidence is denied, and trial proceedings will commence as scheduled. The judicial ruling represented a crucial victory that preserved prosecution strategy, while establishing important legal precedents about federal agent authority and domestic violence response procedure. The decision confirmed that my actions during Christmas dinner had been appropriate and legally sound, eliminating defense attempts to avoid accountability through constitutional technicality. Derek's reaction to the judicial ruling revealed his continued belief that legal maneuvering could enable him to avoid consequences for assaulting Emma, demonstrating persistent failure to accept responsibility for his harmful behavior. His disappointed expression indicated that he had expected constitutional challenges to provide escape from accountability rather than merely delaying trial proceedings. The successful resolution of the first major challenge to our prosecution strengthened family confidence in legal procedures while demonstrating that institutional safeguards existed to protect victims and witnesses from procedural manipulation designed to avoid accountability. The judicial ruling confirmed that justice systems possessed resources to address complex constitutional questions while maintaining focus on fundamental purposes of protecting children from adult violence. As trial proceedings prepared to begin following resolution of the constitutional challenges, our prosecution team had demonstrated ability to overcome sophisticated defense strategies while maintaining comprehensive approach to achieving accountability for Derek's assault on Emma. The first major challenge had been successfully addressed through professional preparation, expert testimony, and judicial commitment to protecting children from violence, regardless of procedurator attempts to exploit procedural technicality. The unexpected development that emerged during jury selection proceedings on Tuesday morning required immediate strategic reconsideration of our prosecution approach, as defense attorney Marcus Webb introduced evidence suggesting that Derek Morrison had been attending anger management counseling sessions for several months prior to the Christmas dinner incident. This revelation, which had not been disclosed during discovery proceedings, created significant complications for prosecution arguments while potentially providing Derek with mitigation factors that could influence jury perceptions about his character and culpability for assaulting Emma. United States Attorney Rachel Chen requested an emergency recess to evaluate the newly disclosed information and determine whether prosecution strategy required fundamental modification to address defense arguments that Derek had been actively seeking professional help for behavioral issues before the assault occurred. The timing of this disclosure suggested deliberate strategic maneuvering designed to create maximum disruption to prosecution preparation while providing Derek with sympathetic narrative that could reduce jury willingness to impose serious consequences for his violent behavior. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in anger management therapy and domestic violence intervention program, joined our prosecution team as an expert consultant to evaluate the significance of Derek's counseling participation and provide professional perspective on whether such interventions typically prevented violent behavior or merely provided superficial appearance of rehabilitation. Her expertise would be essential for addressing defense claims that Derek's therapy participation demonstrated genuine commitment to behavioral change rather than strategic positioning for legal proceedings. Agent Mitchell, the defense disclosure about Derek's anger management counseling creates both challenges and opportunities for prosecution strategy, Attorney Chen explained during our emergency consultation meeting. While his therapy participation might suggest awareness of behavioral problems, it also indicates that he chose to assault Emma despite receiving professional guidance about appropriate conflict resolution and emotional regulation techniques. The strategic analysis revealed how Derek's counseling participation could actually strengthen prosecution arguments about deliberate choice rather than impulsive behavior, demonstrating that he possessed professional resources for managing anger appropriately but had chosen violence despite access to therapeutic interventions designed to prevent exactly the kind of harmful behavior he had exhibited during Christmas dinner. The defense strategy appeared designed to portray Derek as someone who recognized his problems and was actively working to address them, suggesting that his assault on Emma represented temporary setback in an otherwise positive trajectory toward behavioral improvement. This narrative could potentially generate jury sympathy while minimizing perceptions of Derek as dangerous individual who required serious legal consequences to prevent future violence against children. Dr. Martinez reviewed the anger management program materials and Derek's participation record to assess whether his therapeutic engagement demonstrated genuine commitment to behavioral change or merely compliance with program requirements that might provide legal protection without substantive personal transformation. Her professional evaluation would determine whether Derek's counseling constituted meaningful mitigation or strategic manipulation of therapeutic resources. Derek Morrison's anger management participation records indicate minimal engagement with therapeutic processes and superficial compliance with program requirements, rather than genuine commitment to behavioral change, Dr. Martinez concluded after reviewing the document. His assault on Emma occurred despite receiving specific training about appropriate responses to frustration and conflict, indicating deliberate choice to ignore therapeutic guidance when personal emotions became elevated. The expert analysis provided crucial foundation for reframing Derek's counseling participation as evidence of his awareness about appropriate behavior rather than mitigation for his violent choices. The prosecution could demonstrate that Derek possessed professional resources for managing anger appropriately, but had chosen to assault a child despite receiving explicit training about peaceful conflict resolution techniques. Detective Patricia Morales contributed additional perspective based on her extensive experience with domestic violence cases where perpetrators had participated in court-mandated or voluntary counseling programs while continuing to engage in harmful behavior toward family members. Her professional insights offered valuable context for understanding how therapeutic participation could coexist with continued dangerous behavior patterns. Anger management program participation is common among domestic violence perpetrators who are seeking to improve their public image or legal standing rather than achieving genuine behavioral change, Detective Morales observed during strategy discussion. Derek's assault on Emma, despite receiving therapeutic training, demonstrates that his counseling was ineffective for preventing violence or was never intended to address underlying character issues that enabled him to view striking a child as acceptable behavior. The law enforcement perspective reinforced prosecution arguments that Derek's therapeutic participation had failed to prevent the exact kind of violent behavior that anger management programs were designed to address. His assault on Emma represented failure of counseling interventions rather than evidence of rehabilitation progress that should influence sentencing consideration. The strategic pivot required developing new presentation approaches that would acknowledge Derek's counseling participation while demonstrating how his assault on Emma revealed the ineffectiveness of therapeutic interventions when individuals lacked genuine commitment to behavioral change. The prosecution team needed to transform apparent mitigation factors into evidence of Derek's deliberate choice to ignore professional guidance about appropriate conduct. Judge Patricia Hawkins addressed the discovery timing issue during proceedings designed to determine whether Derek's late disclosure of counseling participation constituted proper evidence presentation or strategic manipulation designed to disrupt prosecution preparation. Her judicial oversight would establish whether defense arguments about anger management therapy could be presented to jury members without providing unfair advantage through delayed disclosure. Attorney Webb, the court is concerned about the timing of this disclosure regarding your client's anger management participation, Judge Hawkins stated during the discovery hearing. The prosecution team deserves adequate opportunity to evaluate and respond to evidence that could significantly influence jury perceptions about defendant culpability and sentencing consideration. The judicial intervention demonstrated court commitment to ensuring fair proceedings while preventing defense teams from gaining strategic advantages through delayed disclosure of potentially significant evidence. Judge Hawkins's oversight protected prosecution rights while maintaining appropriate standards for evidence presentation that served justice rather than tactical maneuvering. Emma's continued resilience during these legal complications provided motivation for adapting prosecution strategy to address new challenges while maintaining focus on achieving accountability for Derek's assault. Her emotional stability despite ongoing court proceedings demonstrated that comprehensive family support
support could enable children to navigate complex legal processes without experiencing additional trauma from procedural complications. My mother reported that Emma had been asking thoughtful questions about justice and fairness that reflected her growing understanding of legal processes while maintaining confidence that adult institutions would ensure appropriate consequences for Derek's harmful behavior. Her perspective provided important reminder that prosecution efforts served fundamental purposes of child protection rather than merely technical legal objectives. Emma asked me whether Derek would learn from going to court that hitting children is wrong, my mother shared during family consultation about trial development. She seems to understand that some adults need stronger lessons than others about appropriate behavior, and she wants to make sure that other children will be protected from people who think violence is acceptable when they become angry. The child perspective reinforced prosecution purposes while providing emotional foundation for overcoming procedural challenges that could potentially delay justice. Emma's concern for other potential victims demonstrated maturity that strengthened family commitment to achieving trial outcomes that would establish appropriate consequences for adults who chose to harm children. The prosecution team developed modified opening statement approaches that would address Derek's anger management participation while emphasizing how his assault on Emma demonstrated failure of therapeutic interventions rather than mitigation of criminal responsibility. The strategic adjustment required careful balance between acknowledging defense evidence and maintaining focus on Derek's deliberate choice to commit violence despite professional guidance about appropriate behavior. Attorney Chen's revised prosecution strategy incorporated expert testimony about anger management program effectiveness while demonstrating how Derek's assault on Emma revealed persistent character issues that therapeutic interventions had failed to address. The approach would transform apparent defense advantages into prosecution evidence about Derek's responsibility for choosing violence despite access to professional resources for peaceful conflict resolution. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence will demonstrate that Derek Morrison chose to assault a 6-year-old child despite receiving professional training specifically designed to prevent exactly this kind of violent behavior. Attorney Chen prepared to argue in modified opening statement. His participation in anger management counseling makes his assault on Emma more disturbing rather than less serious because it indicates deliberate rejection of therapeutic guidance that should have prevented violence against an innocent child. The strategic reframing would demonstrate how Derek's counseling participation actually strengthened prosecution arguments about culpability while addressing defense attempts to portray therapy involvement as evidence of rehabilitation progress. The modified approach maintained prosecution objectives while adapting to unexpected defense evidence that had emerged during jury selection proceedings. Federal investigators provided additional support by conducting comprehensive review of Derek's anger management program, attendance record, therapeutic progress evaluations, and counselor assessments that would establish whether his participation demonstrated genuine commitment to behavioral change or superficial compliance with program requirements. The investigation would provide factual foundation for prosecution arguments about the effectiveness of Derek's therapeutic intervention. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh coordinated the investigation into Derek's counseling records while ensuring that prosecution team access to therapeutic information complied with privacy regulations and judicial oversight requirements. Her coordination ensured that evidence gathering supported prosecution objectives while maintaining appropriate legal standards for accessing confidential therapeutic material. Agent Mitchell, our investigation into Derek's anger management records indicates minimal therapeutic progress and superficial engagement with program requirements, Special Agent Walsh reported after completing the record review. His counselor notes express concern about his resistance to accepting responsibility for anger-related behaviors and his tendency to externalize blame for interpersonal conflict. The investigation results provided compelling evidence that Derek's counseling participation had been ineffective for addressing underlying character issues that enabled him to view violence against children as acceptable behavior when his emotional control became compromised. The therapeutic records would support prosecution arguments about Derek's responsibility for choosing assault despite professional intervention designed to prevent exactly such harmful conduct. The strategic pivot required extensive coordination between prosecution team members, expert witnesses, and family members to ensure that modified trial approaches would achieve justice while addressing unexpected defense evidence that could potentially influence jury perceptions about Derek's character and rehabilitation potential. The comprehensive response demonstrated how professional legal teams could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining focus on fundamental objectives of child protection and criminal accountability. As jury selection resumed following resolution of the discovery issue, our prosecution team had successfully transformed apparent defense advantages into evidence supporting arguments about Derek's culpability and responsibility for choosing violence despite access to therapeutic resources that should have prevented assault on a child. The strategic pivot had strengthened rather than weakened prosecution arguments, while demonstrating adaptability and professional competence in addressing unexpected trial developments. The modified prosecution strategy reflected comprehensive understanding of domestic violence dynamics while maintaining focus on Emma's protection and the broader community interest in holding perpetrators accountable for harmful behavior regardless of their access to therapeutic interventions or superficial compliance with anger management programs. The strategic adjustments served justice while adapting to defense tactics designed to avoid accountability through claims about rehabilitation efforts that had proven ineffective for preventing violence against innocent children. The complexities revealed during Derek Morrison's trial preparation had demonstrated that achieving comprehensive justice for Emma's assault required coordination between diverse professional specialties, advocacy organizations, and community resources that extended far beyond traditional law enforcement and legal prosecution. The case had evolved into a collaborative effort involving federal investigators, local police, child psychologists, domestic violence specialists, constitutional law experts, and family advocacy professionals whose collective expertise would ensure that Emma's experience contributed to broader protection for vulnerable children while establishing important precedents about accountability for adults who chose to commit violence. Dr. Amanda Foster, the child psychologist who had been working with Emma throughout the legal proceedings, reached out to colleagues at the National Center for Child Trauma and Recovery to develop comprehensive support protocols that would serve as a model for other cases involving young victims of domestic violence. Her initiative reflected professional recognition that Emma's case provided opportunities to advance therapeutic practices while ensuring that individual treatment remained focused on her specific needs and recovery objectives. Agent Mitchell, Emma's remarkable resilience throughout these legal proceedings has provided valuable insights about effective support strategies for child victims of domestic violence, Dr. Foster explained during our consultation about expanding therapeutic resources. Her emotional stability and continued development suggest that comprehensive family support combined with specialized professional intervention can enable children to navigate complex legal processes without experiencing lasting psychological harm. The therapeutic innovation emerging from Emma's case would contribute to improved treatment protocols for other young victims while demonstrating how individual experiences could serve broader purposes of advancing professional knowledge and community protection capability. Emma's healing journey was strengthening rather than being diminished by its contribution to helping other children who might face similar trauma. Detective Patricia Morales had initiated coordination with domestic violence units throughout the Pacific Northwest to share investigative techniques and prosecution strategies that had proven effective in Derek's case. Her professional networking was creating regional collaboration that would improve law enforcement responses to domestic violence while ensuring that Derek's prosecution contributed to broader improvements in child protection capabilities. Agent Mitchell, the investigative approaches we developed for documenting Derek's behavioral patterns and presenting evidence about escalation dynamics have attracted interest from domestic violence specialists across multiple jurisdictions, Detective Morales reported during team coordination meetings. Your federal expertise, combined with local law enforcement experience, has created prosecution strategies that other agencies want to incorporate into their own case development procedure. The law enforcement collaboration demonstrated how individual cases could catalyze broader institutional improvements while serving immediate justice objectives for specific victims. Derek's prosecution was contributing to enhanced law enforcement capabilities that would protect other children from adults who chose to commit violence while providing more effective support for families navigating complex legal proceedings. Attorney Rachel Chen had been invited to present our prosecution strategies at the National Conference on Domestic Violence Litigation, where legal professionals would learn about federal jurisdiction applications, constitutional challenges, and witness protection protocols that had proven effective during Derek's case. Her professional presentation would share expertise while advancing legal system capabilities for addressing domestic violence that crossed traditional jurisdictional boundaries. The legal strategies we developed for Derek Morrison's prosecution demonstrate how federal and local law enforcement can coordinate effectively to ensure comprehensive accountability for domestic violence while protecting child victims from additional trauma during legal proceedings. Attorney Chen prepared for her conference presentation. The case has established important precedents about federal agent authority during off-duty situations while developing innovative approaches to presenting complex evidence about behavioral patterns and escalation dynamics. Innovation emerging from Derek's prosecution would influence professional practices throughout the federal court system while ensuring that other families would benefit from improved procedures for seeking justice when children experienced violence from adults who possessed social or professional standing that might otherwise shield them from appropriate consequences. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh had been coordinating with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit to develop improved threat assessment protocols for domestic violence cases involving federal personnel or their family members. Her initiative reflected institutional recognition that Derek's case had revealed both strengths and potential improvements in federal law enforcement responses to situations where agents needed to protect family members from violence. Agent Mitchell, your response to Derek Morrison's assault on Emma demonstrated exemplary application of federal training while protecting family members, but the case also highlighted opportunities to improve institutional support for agents who face similar situations. Special Agent Walsh explained during FBI coordination meeting, the Behavioral Analysis Unit wants to incorporate lessons learned from your case into updated training protocols that will better prepare agents for protecting family members while maintaining professional standards and constitutional compliance. The federal institutional learning demonstrated how individual cases could strengthen broader law enforcement capabilities while ensuring that other agents would receive enhanced preparation for situations requiring immediate protective action during personal circumstances. Emma's experience was contributing to improved federal law enforcement training that would better protect other families from violence.
Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the clinical psychologist who had evaluated Derek's anger management records, joined forces with researchers at Portland State University to develop improved assessment protocols for evaluating whether therapeutic interventions were achieving genuine behavioral change or merely providing superficial compliance that could mask continued dangerous attitudes. Her research initiative would enhance professional capabilities for distinguishing between authentic rehabilitation and strategic manipulation of therapeutic resources. Derek Morrison's case demonstrates the need for more sophisticated evaluation methods that can identify whether individuals participating in anger management programs are achieving genuine behavioral change or simply learning to present themselves more favorably while maintaining underlying attitudes that enable continued harmful behavior. Dr. Martinez explained during academic consultation meeting. Emma's assault occurred despite Derek's therapeutic participation, indicating that current assessment protocols require enhancement to better predict and prevent future violence. The therapeutic research emerging from Derek's case would improve professional capabilities for evaluating treatment effectiveness, while ensuring that anger management programs would better protect potential victims from individuals who manipulated therapeutic resources without achieving genuine behavioral transformation. The academic collaboration would advance therapeutic practices while serving broader community protection objectives. Judge Patricia Hawkins had been consulting with federal judicial colleagues about procedural innovations that had proven effective during Derek's case, particularly regarding constitutional challenges, witness protection protocols, and evidence presentation strategies that balanced comprehensive prosecution with appropriate defendant rights. Her judicial leadership was influencing court procedures throughout the federal system, while ensuring that other cases would benefit from improved practices. The procedural innovations developed during Derek Morrison's prosecution have demonstrated how federal courts can address complex constitutional challenges while maintaining focus on fundamental objectives of child protection and criminal accountability. Judge Hawkins shared during judicial coordination conferences, "The case has established important precedents while developing practical procedures that other federal courts can adopt for similar cases involving domestic violence and federal jurisdiction questions." The judicial innovation demonstrated how individual cases could strengthen entire legal systems while ensuring that constitutional protections serve justice rather than enabling harmful individuals to avoid accountability through procedural manipulation. Derek's prosecution was contributing to improved federal court capabilities that would better protect other victims while maintaining appropriate legal standards. Emma herself had become an inadvertent catalyst for broader institutional improvements while maintaining focus on her own recovery and continued development. Her participation in therapeutic protocols, legal proceedings, and family conversations had provided valuable insights about effective support strategies while demonstrating remarkable resilience that inspired professional innovation across multiple disciplines. "Mommy, Foster told me that talking about what happened to me might help other kids who have scary experiences with adults who make bad choices," Emma shared during one of our evening conversations about her ongoing participation in the case. "I want to help keep other children safe from people who think hitting is okay when they get angry at little things." Her continued concern for other potential victims demonstrated emotional maturity that strengthened professional commitment to ensuring that her experience would contribute to broader protective capabilities while maintaining focus on her individual needs and recovery objectives. Emma's wisdom was inspiring adults to develop better systems for protecting children while achieving personal healing that validated comprehensive support approaches. My own role had evolved from individual federal agent protecting her daughter to collaborative leader coordinating diverse professional resources toward achieving justice while advancing institutional capabilities for protecting other families. The experience had demonstrated how personal crisis could catalyze professional growth while serving broader community protection objectives through effective coordination of specialized expertise. The team-building process had revealed how complex cases required diverse professional perspectives while maintaining unified focus on fundamental objectives of child protection and criminal accountability. The collaboration had strengthened rather than complicated prosecution efforts while creating lasting improvements in institutional capabilities that would serve other families facing similar challenges. Pastor Michael Roberts from my mother's church had initiated interfaith cooperation with community religious organizations to develop comprehensive support networks for families navigating domestic violence, legal proceedings. His spiritual leadership was creating community resources that would provide emotional and practical support while demonstrating how religious institutions could contribute effectively to child protection efforts. "Sarah, your family's courage in pursuing justice for Emma, despite social pressures and procedural complications, has inspired our religious community to develop more effective support systems for families facing domestic violence," Pastor Roberts explained during community coordination meetings. "We want to ensure that other families will have access to spiritual support, practical resources, and advocacy assistance that can help them navigate complex legal proceedings while maintaining focus on protecting children from harmful adults." The community collaboration demonstrated how individual cases could strengthen broader social support systems while ensuring that families would receive comprehensive assistance during challenging legal proceedings. The interfaith cooperation was creating lasting community resources that would serve protective objectives while providing spiritual foundation for seeking justice rather than accepting harmful behavior through misguided concepts of forgiveness that enabled continued violence. The comprehensive team that had emerged around Emma's case included federal investigators, local police, prosecutors, judges, psychologists, academic researchers, community advocates, and religious leaders whose collective expertise had transformed individual trauma into systematic improvements in child protection capabilities. The collaboration had achieved immediate justice objectives while creating lasting institutional enhancements that would serve other vulnerable families. As Derek's trial entered its final preparation phase, the expanded professional team had developed innovative approaches to prosecution, victim support, and institutional coordination that would influence practices throughout multiple professional disciplines while ensuring that Emma's experience contributed to broader protective capabilities without compromising her individual recovery and continued development. The team-building process demonstrated how achieving comprehensive justice required coordination between diverse professional specialties while maintaining unified focus on fundamental objectives of protecting children from adult violence and holding perpetrators accountable, regardless of their social standing, professional credentials. The collaborative effort had strengthened prosecution effectiveness while creating lasting improvements in community protection capabilities. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.